Do you see any specific trends in the security industry for 2017?
Well, I think that the main trend of 2017, that is clearly going to be the cybersecurity. Because if we look on video surveillance cameras, they are now IP-based and they are an intelligent network node. And we have seen the attacks of the last couple of weeks here. I mean, first they brought down some key services such as the DNS, and then they even brought down a whole country. And that was the result of some cheap and inferior IP cameras and DVRs. And they were configured with a standard hard-coded root password, and they were relying on the they were put on the open internet. And that's, of course, if it had been in the IT industry, that would have been an absolute no-no. But we in the security industry, we unfortunately lag a little bit behind the IT security. And what's very important is that it is a network node, and you have to apply the same measures of security as you would do with any other IT security device. Doing that means, I mean, the very most basic is, of course, to assign a proper password and not have a device that has a hard-coded root password. That's of course a no-no. Then you should look on other areas to ring-fence it, such as the common procedures in IT departments. So you need to make sure that depending on how your system is set up, I mean, having an open port for remote login is typically not a very good idea. But if you need it, you should of course have it, and you should have different passwords. If it's a high security environment, you should consider 802.1x. It's cumbersome, but of course it adds an extra layer of security. At Axis, we have since more than a year ago published a hardening guide that goes through step by step in detail on the areas you can do in order to harden your security system. And this has, of course, been taken up by some of our colleagues in the industry as well. So I think this is clearly the number one trend of 2017. One final aspect of the cybersecurity, that is that you should know what type of device you have. If you look in corporate IT, I mean, they typically approve and disapprove certain vendors and softwares. And I think the same should go for video surveillance equipment. It's after all security. And knowing the device you actually have is quite important, because it's common in our industry to use OEM device. So you put on a certain logo, but in reality the product comes from a different vendor. And that vendor may not have the same security measures as the vendor that has its logo on top of it. And having a policy that just states a certain vendor and then knowing that it may be something else, that's of course like having a Trojan horse. And that was exactly what happened with those attacks a few weeks ago. And the problem with OEM is that typically an OEM, he will make a skin out of the product. So he takes the OEM product, but he adds his own logo, adds some kind of custom GUI, and that's nice and fair. But however, when the vendor is about to upgrade the firmware because they find some security threats or some other functionality, what happens is that those skinnings that they have done for different OEMs, of course, they start by having it in their own version first. They put it through quality control and testing. And then once that is done, they probably need to negotiate with the OEM to make an added skinning out of their latest release. And this process typically takes 3 to 6 months. So if you have an OEM device on your network, that will always be 3 to 6 months behind in firmware compared to an original manufacturer. And this, I think, could be actually quite a big threat. So this is something to think about and to put into your considerations and specs.
Internet of Things has been a hot topic for a while now, but you have been talking about Internet of Security Things. What do you actually mean by that?
Well, we have looked at it by our history, I mean, we have always added devices to the internet. We actually did that ever since the early 90s. And now with video surveillance, I mean, initially we put the cameras on the network and the video encoders. But we looked on it on a broader perspective, and we realized that when you have live monitoring of a certain site and you actually see something going on, I once read a study in the US, and it said that 75% of all illegal activity is actually terminated if people know that they are being watched. And how shall they know that they are watched? Well, by the very simple thing of putting up like an IP-based horn speaker, you can tell them to go away. It's excellent for like a school environment where people come at night and dwell, or if they even do worse things like painting graffiti or putting up fires. I mean, if you can just scream to them and say, "Hey, we see you, go away." I think that's such an easy save and sell up to the customers, so that it's sort of a given. And the IP speaker, I mean, that's sort of the ultimate IoT device, because it has its IP address, it takes its power from the network, and that's all you need to do is to mount it, and you're done. Looking on the Internet of Security Things, there are of course more than horn speakers that you can do. You can do like the traditional door station or intercom. So if you have like a critical infrastructure environment, or you're putting up help stations, then you can have an intercom which is IP based. Have in mind that this is very much of an analog market today, and being able and have ability to put up a really high-end door station is usually a good thing. And also, when you do those devices in like a help point in a city or in an underground, these help stations, they are typically put up where they can be put up, not where they are ideal from a camera point of view. And that means it puts a lot of requirements on the camera. So you really need high-end cameras, and of course, if it's a train station, it's kind of noisy sometimes. You have to have really superior audio quality, otherwise the device has no value. So that's also some trend going on. We see more and more companies doing this.
Okay, so is there any other trends you would like to touch upon?
Well, I mean, one of the favorite trends that's definitely going to happen for next year as well, for 2017, that is the smart codecs and smart compression. I mean, this has really been the key thing of 2016, but it's definitely coming to 2017 as well. I mean, if not else, I mean, just for the simple fact that people are deploying higher and higher resolutions. I mean, we see strong sales pickup in the 4K cameras, because there is not so much of a price difference between a full HD and 4K nowadays. But in order to use the 4K, I mean, it's useless if you don't have smart compression, because it just generates too much data. So these two combinations are definitely trends that we will see throughout the year.